Hi, my name is Felipa, and today is day 111 out of my 365-day commitment to read this Bible. So today was actually quite a long reading, quite a few pages, but not only that, it was quite in depth about Job's experience losing his health, wealth, and family. And so we left it yesterday on his friends visiting him and mourning in silence. So today I'm going to just go through these sections very quickly because there's so much depth in each of these sections. There's about 23 or so in this set, this reading set from chapter 13 until chapter 14. That was the assigned reading for today. And so there's about 23 different little sections, and I'll kind of read out the titles of them, but I really need to go through each of them in depth and add more thoughts to it because there's quite a lot of wisdom in them. So starting off with chapter 3, we start off with Job cursing the day that he was born and saying things like, the day he was born, as for that night, let darkness seize upon it, let it not be joined onto the days of the year, let it not come into the number of the months. Let it look for light, but have none. Like very deeply profound sentences talking about how he curses the day he was born. Then we go into the next section. Job says, why live a life of anguish? In verse 23, he says, why is light given to a man whose way is hid and whom God hath hedged in? So he's like really questioning his reality, right? Then his friend Eliphaz tells Job to be patient and says how only evil people suffer, that purity before God is impossible. In verse 17, it says, shall mortal men be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his maker? So essentially saying it doesn't matter how much you try to conceive purity or goodness, how can a mortal man be more than God? How can he be more pure than his maker? So that's kind of interesting, right? It makes it seem like man will always forever be a sinner, and the best thing that you can do is just strive to be as good as possible, but you'll clearly never get to the level that God is at. Eliphaz then continues and says, reminds him to seek God's help. And this next section, again on Eliphaz, saying that blessing of God's correction, saying, behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou the chastening of the Almighty. So saying, be glad when God corrects you and corrects your misgivings and missteps and transgressions. And don't despise it when you get corrected by God. Be happy. So that's also really deep. In chapter 6, Job then says, God has attacked me without cause. So he's quite distressed about how he's been feeling. He then continues in this section saying that he desires the comfort of death, saying, what is my strength that I should hope, and what is mine end that I should prolong my life? So he's really asking, like, what is in the end there for me that makes me choose to prolong my life? He's really questioning his whole entirety. Job continues in this section by speaking about how he's being treated unkindly. In this section, saying that human existence is futile. So he's really quite desolate. Here he even says, I loathe my life. And this is chapter 7, verse 13, saying, when I say, my bed shall comfort me, my couch shall ease my complaint, then thou scarest me with dreams and terrifiest me through visions, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than my life. I loathe it. I would not live alway. Let me alone, for my days are vanity. So really just saying like, just let me die, so that my soul chooses strangling and death rather than my life. Another friend, Bildad, says, you're unjustly accusing God. God does not punish the innocent. Talks about that part too. Job then goes into it again, and he says it's futile to argue with God. In chapter 9, verse 32, he says, for he is not a man as I am, that I should answer him, and we should come together in judgment. I really like this part too, right? Like thinking of our perspectives of God are very singular and very particular to the human existence, but God's view of us is different. And how can we possibly see eye to eye when we're two different creatures and two different entities? And so that's the maker and the created, the maker and the product. And that part is fascinating. I'd never thought about that, but how could you see eye to eye with somebody who's completely different with you? No different than how we struggle to see eye to eye with different languages or different religions, different ethnicities, and things like that. So, fascinating sentence. Job continues here in this section saying, "My soul is weary of my life." I will not read this whole section, but like everything here, he's just saying he's so desperately seeking consult and wondering why he's even alive. Another friend, Zophar, says God can do as he pleases, saying here, "Know therefore the God exacteth of thee less than thy iniquity deserveth." Essentially saying God's punishing you way less than you deserve it. So that's interesting too. Zophar continues and says, "Confess your sin and be forgiven." Job says, "You have no wisdom." Then he says, "Wisdom comes from God." So that's a really important piece too. And then these last two sections that we end the reading on today, Job talks about, he says, "Though God slay me, I will trust him. Oh, that ye would altogether hold your peace, and it should be your wisdom." And basically saying to his friends and himself, but mostly to his friends that, essentially don't say anything, and that will be your wisdom by not offering your opinions. Job ends this part on saying, "God, please hear me." He says, "I don't want to be afraid of you. I want to speak to you. I want to reach towards you. I don't want to hide my face from you. I want to connect with you." And ending it on this section on chapter 14, "God, consider my frail human nature." This is where I end today's reading. Like I said, lots of sections, very, very deep sections, and very different from what I've read up to this point. Up to this point, it has been very kind of historical, lots of, mentions of people and sort of really big kind of events. And now we're getting into more of that one-to-one conversation between man and God, man's ideas of God, man's opinions of God, man's transgressions, man's reflections, man's insights, reflections, contemplations, introspections, the philosophy of everything, and really going into the self and questioning the existence of God, questioning sanity and self, and the essence of one's spirit and of one's mind. And so tomorrow is day 112 on the 21st of December. I will start on chapter 15 with Eliphaz saying, "You were speaking sinfully." I will let you know what I read. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any comments, please let me know, because this section is quite heavy and quite fascinating. Thank you.